Our next speaker, Jane Werner, will talk about rebuilding the neighborhood with sustainability at the core. Jane has 25 years of experience, including museum experience, including 17 years at the Children's Museum in Pittsburgh, where she has served as program director, deputy director, and executive director. She is responsible for all aspects of the museum's mission, vision, exhibits, public programming, funding, and operations. She is also president of the board of the Greater Pittsburgh Arts Council and is the treasurer of the new Hazlitt Theater. She currently sits on the board of Forbes Fund and the Association of Children's Museums, along with other museums and museum-related boards. She received a BFA from Syracuse and attended the IME, Museum Management Institute of the Getty Foundation, and was a fellow at the Studio for Creative Inquiry at Carnegie Mellon University. Please welcome Ms. Jane Werner.
I almost start every session that I do with a quote from Fred Rogers. And Fred Rogers was actually a Pittsburgher, as well as a good friend of the Children's Museum and a good friend of mine. And one of the things that kind of always influences our work is this quote that he had: "Please think of the children first. If you ever have anything to do with their entertainment, their food, their toys, their custody, their child care, their health care, their education, listen to the children. Learn about them, learn from them, and think of the children first." So being a children's museum, you know, you're always defined by your audience, not necessarily the subject matter. And it's really important to us as we kind of move forward to always think of them. That's the title. We start every meeting at the Children's Museum with a mission statement. If you come to the Children's Museum, I challenge you to ask any of the staff what our mission statement is, and if they don't know it, they owe me $1. So the Children's Museum of Pittsburgh provides innovative museum experiences which foster joy, creativity, and curiosity. So do you see anything there about sustainability or the neighborhood or the museum? Is there anything in there about any of the things that I'm going to be talking about? And is this a moment where maybe we have mission creep? So just to kind of give you the definition of sustainability, which is really at the core of what we're talking about. Sustainability is in many things to many people. It can simultaneously be an idea, a property of living systems, a manufacturing method, or a way of life. For some people, it's little more than a hollow buzzword, although the definition of sustainable development given by the 1987 Brundtland Commission is the most frequently quoted. It's the one that I just mentioned. It's not universally accepted and has undergone various interpretations. And it just goes on and on. It talks about sustainability has gotten to be kind of like liberty or justice or ethics. It's kind of a very general concept. But what we did was we looked at it, from a financial, environment, and from a programmatic and neighborhood. We think that making a museum sustainable includes all of those aspects. Anybody been to Pittsburgh lately? Oops, I keep going on. All right. It's not what you imagine. I think there are a lot of people who have imagined it as a very smoky industrial city. We've actually reinvented ourselves to be one of the greenest cities in the country. This is a shot of Pittsburgh. It's a great place to raise a kid. In fact, it was actually just voted the #1 city in Pennsylvania by Business Week magazine to raise children. It's cleaner. There are no steel mills left. It's smaller. There's about 1 million less people, and it's younger. It's kind of interesting because everyone left when the steel mills closed, and so there were only very old people left and kind of a new generation. Well, now the old people are actually dying off. 1 foot on the banana peel. And we are actually going to be a very young city. It also has nice old money left over from the Industrial Revolution, or yes, the Industrial Revolution. It was really interesting that all the money kind of stayed in Pittsburgh, except for a few exceptions, Frick being one of them. And it's great. Our foundation community is very strong, and they invest a lot into the museum business. And this is the Children's Museum. The Children's Museum started off in the building over to the left-hand side of the slide. It's a 1893 post office, and it was in 20,000 square feet. The building over to the right is the Buell Planetarium, which was closed in 1991 and sat vacant until 2004. We began to really look at expansion. I always say that, 20,000 square feet, we were seeing about 100,000 kids a year. I really like kids, but too small a space for that many kids. I didn't like them that much. So we really decided that we really needed to expand, and we felt that it was really our responsibility to stay in this neighborhood. It's actually kind of the, it's not the garden spot of Pittsburgh. It's in a very interesting neighborhood. And we also thought it was our responsibility to take over the old Buell Planetarium. It was a vacant building. It was gorgeous. We ran a National Endowment for the Arts design competition, and we hired Kona Geisenberg out of Santa Monica, California from that competition. We do have a commitment to design excellence, and they really got us. It's won the National American Institute for Architecture Award. It's won the National Trust for Historic Preservation Award, and the list of awards go on, the Werner Award for Urban Design Excellence. The building in between is just a light-filled, wonderful building that has a Ned Kahn sculpture on the outside of it, which is a wind sculpture. And it just is beautiful when it's a windy day. Everyone loves it. It's a museum not only for children and not only for families, but it's for everyone. And that's something that we really strive to do. My favorite story about the museum, actually my favorite compliment, is I kept noticing this woman who was about 40 years old, kind of just hanging out in the museum. I finally went over to her and I said, I see you here all the time. She goes, yeah, I come all the time. I don't have kids. Is that okay? I'm like, sure. She said, I come because you guys have great karma. So I'll take karma anytime. This just gives you some ideas about what the interior of the museum looks like. We really do have this kind of commitment to design. We design all of our exhibits in-house. We do a lot of prototyping, and we work with the University of Pittsburgh Center for Learning in Out-of-School Environments, which actually has an office right on site, and they assess everything that we do. We also have areas that are kind of large spaces. This is our studio area, which is open access to art materials. And we change the activities in there all the time so that whenever visitors come, there is something new to do. Currently, we have silk screening and monoprint making and painting, which is always up, paper making, and just the other day I walked down and there was a violin maker. Constantly, in fact, sometimes I'm like, who runs this place? There's always something interesting happening. We actually are kind of unusual in the fact that we do have collections. You get a little sense of that with the Keith Haring elephant right there. We also have a large collection of 20th century prints. So going back to the sustainability concept, financial sustainability, environmental, and how we treat kind of our people and the people who come into the museum. And that's where we kind of wrap up the program in neighborhood. Financial stability, sustainability, or stability. It comes down to the questions, how do you keep an institution going? And how do you protect the investment you've made in the institution? We did a $29 million capital campaign. It was actually set at 28. We over-raised by $1 million, which we were able to then start an endowment of $7 million, which unfortunately is not $7 million anymore. We are really trying to maintain 65% earned revenue, and $22.5 million capital campaign is underway, although it's been slowed down, as you might imagine, and we have no debt. And then I just recently put down this economic meltdown, yikes. Actually, I wanted to use a four-letter word, but I am from a children's museum. So it's kind of it's really interesting times. And for those of you who are not directors, if you see your directors walking around looking rather glum and kind of stressed out, please understand that it's really tough times. We're trying to, you could do a whole session on the ethics of your commitment to the people who work with you and who have been with you for so long, and how that's going to impact their lives. It's a really tough time. It's really, really tough. And maybe, Janet, that's next year's whole thing. Environmental sustainability. We are a silver LEED rated building. For those of you who don't know what that means, it's a leadership in environmental education and something, I can't quite remember, but it is that we actually have all green practices. We also won Green Building Alliance, blah, 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 blah. The sample green features that we have are 100% electrical power from renewable resources, dual flush toilets. I never thought I'd learn so much about plumbing. It was just amazing. We maintained 100% of the existing building shell and over 50% of the non-shell. We do employee carpooling spaces, which is very popular because we have off-site employee parking. So if you carpool, you get right on site. And we actually have a worm bin for kitchen waste, which, you know, I often joke that we're going to become the Children's Museum and bait shop, a new income stream for us. But I think that the story that I wanted to tell about our green features, it started a long time ago, even before we had the new building. I feel like I have to do this. I'm sorry, I'm so tall. I feel like I'm bending over. Is that okay? We actually started, one of our employees was just really committed to being green, and so we set up a interdepartmental committee, and they just have been going great guns. And they're the ones who actually, when we did this expansion, they came to me and said, you know, there's this thing called LEED. We should think about being a LEED building. And it was early on in the LEED process, and we were actually one of the ones to help the public end of the LEED scoring system kind of get together. So it was really interesting that it's really from the ground up, and we actually used to all take our recycling home. We would actually have the visitors recycling, and we would take it home. I'm sure that the garbage men were always wondering why at my house every other week it was like really a lot of things to recycle. But it's really become part of our mission, and it's really become something that I've become very passionate about. I also want to tell the story about how we actually affected policy at the city level with being green. We did take over the Buell building. It's still a city building. And when we were doing the renovations, the city said, you know, just throw away the stuff that you're taking out. And we said, no, we're not doing that, that we have this real commitment to being green, and we're going to give it to Construction Junction, which is a nonprofit that we have in Pittsburgh who resells construction materials. And the city said, no, you can't, because it's city property, and you can't do that. And we said, no, sorry, we're not throwing it away. We're not making this thing into landfill. We actually drew a line in the sand and actually stored all of the construction material until the city went through a bidding process. Sure enough, Construction Junction got the bid, because it's the only game in town. And now every time that the city does a renovation, all of the building materials go to Construction Junction. So the little tiny children's museum actually changed policy at the city level. So here's some ideas about sustainable resources. I really did not press it, it just went. If you go to any of those, I think that you can actually get some more information if you want about being green in your museum. And even if you're not a director, just start. Now my whole focus is going to be on neighborhood sustainability. The Children's Museum is not just the Children's Museum, but it's also a place for people who work with children or on behalf of children. We have all of these partners who live with us. Child Watch, which is a child advocacy group, Reading is Fundamental. Woe Studio, which is actually trying to start a 501c3 for a cartooning museum. They actually are prototyping, and we're incubating that idea in the museum. We've given him a hallway to try his idea out. Saturday Light Brigade, which is a radio program call-in radio program for families. It's actually in our basement. And we also have the Pittsburgh Public School Head Start. We have 2 classrooms of Head Start kids who come every day to the museum. They all get family memberships, so we get to know the kids really, really well. They're our kids. and I can't tell you how much we've learned from them. And then we have the University of Pittsburgh Center for Learning in Out-of-School Environments, and they do a lot of major research at the museum. If you go to their website, you can see what they've learned about how families learn in our environment. It's pretty interesting. They gave me a book about this big when we first opened about every one of our exhibit components and what happens at every one of them and the amount of time that people spend. On average, the museum visit at our place is 4.5 hours, which is an eternity for a children's museum. And here is our immediate neighborhood. You can see the 3 buildings that we took over, and then there's the first commissioned Carnegie Library next door to us. And attached to that is the Hazlitt Theater. And if it can come up. The Hazlitt Theater was actually closed in 1996, I think it was, when the public theater moved downtown. And the Children's Museum decided it was not really great to have a closed theater right next. We just invested $28 million into this neighborhood, and we had all these closed buildings. We felt like we were kind of taking over all the historic buildings that had been closed. And so we decided to go together, mainly with the Warhol Museum. Now, who would have ever thought the Children's Museum and the Warhol would have anything in common? But we partnered together, and we raised $2.5 million. We got the city involved, we got the Northside Leadership Conference involved, and 2 of the art groups. And we formed a small board, got a 501c3, hired a really fantastic executive director. And we reopened that theater in 2006, and it's been fully booked ever since. It is a separate institution, and it's just really wonderful. Going on from that, we decided, well, that worked so well, and these partnerships that we have in the museum work so well. What happens if we just keep partnering? What happens if we just try to build? Pittsburgh is kind of, it needs to do things together to really kind of go forward. So we started something called the Charm Bracelet Project. And we got a grant from the National Endowment for the Arts. The concept is that all of these cultural institutions on the north side of Pittsburgh could band together. And what if we banded together, could we possibly take this section of Pittsburgh and really make it into this new cultural kind of neighborhood? So you can see Artist Image Resources is AIR, Carnegie Library of Pittsburgh, Science Center, Mattress Factory, which is an installation art, absolutely fabulous place if you haven't been there. New Hazlitt Theater, Children's Museum, the National Aviary, Venture Outdoors, and the Warhol. And this is where we're all located. So the initial idea really was just one day I was sitting around with our deputy director, and I said, these are gross generalizations, but downtown Pittsburgh is, the cultural district, and the south side is when you're 20 and 30, you go to drink. And what happens if the north side of Pittsburgh is a family district? And that was the premise of the NEA grant. We had 4 design teams from all over the world actually come in, and they looked at how we were going to do this from an urban design point of view, from a marketing image point of view, and from a programmatic point of view. And programmatic, I don't mean that the aviary brings a penguin over to the Children's Museum. That's really nice, and we should be doing that already. But what I'm talking about is actually leveraging our strength, like the Warhol and the Children's Museum going together to reopen a theater. Could we actually find other opportunities like that? And this is just one of the ideas that came out of bringing these 4 design teams together. This is a couple of images of lighting, public art. We have these ugly, ugly underpasses, and so there was a lot of concentration on could we make them into the entryway into the north side. Urban planning, this is Doug Sussman's vision out of Santa Monica. He's actually quite brilliant and really did a wonderful job of really bringing the neighborhood along to these kind of innovative ideas. Adaptive reuse, a wilderness trail that would actually go from the Carnegie Science Center up to a major park that's around. And here's some other ideas of actually putting shipping containers in the underpasses for bike usage and farmers market under the underpasses. Cross-programming, the charm school idea, where you would take all of the charms, which are the cultural institutions, and what we're doing is looking for the bracelet. If you took the charms and you actually infused the charms into the public schools on the north side. So for example, the aviary would take over Martin Luther King's school, and it would have an ecology-based curriculum. Could we actually make those schools the most desirable schools in Pittsburgh to go, therefore kind of elevating the community? There's some other ideas about a treasure hunt, and this is just the location of where everything was. We actually did this map. That was one of the first things that happened. And then we got $350,000 from the Grable Foundation at Pittsburgh, that nice old money I was talking about. And we decided as a group, because we would always meet as a group, the Charms would always sit around the table all equally after we did this NEA grant. And we said, okay, what are we going to do with this money that we got? And the first thing that we decided to do was microgrants, that the Charms would actually go together and try to figure out the connections between them. So for $5,000 to $10,000, they would actually came up with ideas. My favorite is kayaking on Lake Elizabeth, and that was with Venture Outdoors at Pittsburgh that does kind of adventure things on the rivers. There's a man-made lake in this park that kind of surrounds all of the Charms, and its park is just not used. It's a horrible park. And they did kayak lessons for free every night this summer. And they had people lined up like you can't believe. The picture below is at the Mattress Factory, where they did a community art program with the Pittsburgh Project, which is in one of the Pittsburgh Project is one of the is in the neighborhood that's just a disaster on the north side. And they even did bike tours. Now, I never thought the bike tours would actually go over between the Charms, but in fact, they had 25 people almost every time that they did the bike tour. We also implemented the treasure hunt on the north side, where you use your cell phone. You pick up a map at all the Charms, and then you can go to different areas, and you can use your cell phone. It asks questions, you answer on the cell phone, and you can go to the next charm and the next charm. Eventually, you can end up at the Children's Museum and get a special gift. But it's been a really wonderful family thing to do, and it's gotten people into the north side. We also raised $250,000. We're just in the midst of this project of taking over one of the underpasses. This is a Federal Street underpass. You can see how it looks on the left-hand side. And we're turning it into the Underpass Gallery. And this is designed by Paula Scheer. She's out of Pentagram in New York. She's a big-time graphic designer. Redesigned New York Times Magazine and Jon Stewart's set. And what she's proposed is actually taking it, whitewashing it, putting tons of light in it, and then hanging and having a grid system so that the first installation will be with the Children's Museum artist. The next one will be with Warhol. The next one will be with the Artist Image Resources, and it just goes on. So every 6 months, we're going to actually rotate, and we're going to take a space that's essentially dead and make it into something really wonderful. And then this is our final project, or not final, I never should say final. This is a project that we've decided at the Children's Museum to take on. We have this kind of ugly park in the front, all cement, never used, poorly maintained. It is a public park. And we are in the process of raising money to turn it into a demonstration project on green practices. We have bioswales, and we have permeable paving and permeable asphalt. And the city is really interested in this because the city has huge problems. Again, we are committed to environmental things, but they're not willing to take kind of the risks. So we're going to actually turn this 1-acre park into a demonstration project. And we have had over 20 community meetings to get it to this point where the design is actually approved and going forward. This is also the result of a design competition that the NEA funded. So for more information, there are all the websites that I could think of. We did the Rudy Bruner Urban Design Excellence Award. We did receive the Gold Award. They actually wrote a whole book about us called Building Sustainable Neighborhoods. Isn't that convenient? And if you would like a copy of it, just contact the Bruner Foundation. It's a really great resource for really everything. Actually, the Bruner Foundation is very cool about how cultural institutions can play a role in rebuilding cities and rebuilding neighborhoods. So thank you.